Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Women on Boards event. Nancy, you haven't missed the start. We're delighted that you're here. So thank you to everybody who started to comment in the chat. This is our first virtual event for 2020 Women on Boards here in the UK. And it's great because it means that we've been able to expand beyond London, across the UK, and in fact, across the States. So Susan, welcome from the East Coast of America. I know there are others joining or coming online just now from America as well. Welcome to you all. We're delighted that you're with us. My name's Anastasia, and I'm going to be guiding you through the first part of the event, which is our fantastic speaker panel. And that's going to be followed by mentoring in breakout rooms. So we'll come to that in the second part of the event. As some of you have already found, we have a chat function enabled this afternoon here in the UK, the morning in the US. And the chat function is there for you to connect with each other and also to celebrate anything that you hear from our fantastic speakers this afternoon. There is also a Q&A function on the webinar. Now, we may have a little time for questions, but there's quite a lot of you joining, so we probably won't get time to do lots of questions, I'm afraid, but hold on to those great questions and we'll make sure that, that you're able to ask those in your breakout sessions. If you've got something burning though, do please pop it in that Q&A box and we'll try to get to a couple of those after our speakers have shared their fantastic content with you this afternoon. I also wanted to let you know that, as you might have seen, this webinar is being recorded. That's just the first part. And for you as attendees, you'll know that you're not on camera, you're not on microphone, so you can relax and enjoy the great content. You can have a cup of tea, you can juggle childcare, you can make notes. Don't worry, you won't be on camera. Likewise, we won't be recording the mentoring sessions. So that will be a really open, free conversation, a safe space to ask all of the questions that you might like to ask, both of your mentor and also of the others that will join you in your group. So what I wanted to do next was kick off by welcoming, first of all, our first speaker, who is the chair of 2020 Women on Board, Betsy. Now, she is the dynamo behind a lot of these events that are happening not only here in the UK, but across the States and around the world. So I want to invite Betsy to turn on your camera, turn on your volume, and welcome. Hi, Betsy. I'm going to let you say hello to all of our fantastic attendees, and thank you for being with us.
Good evening, everybody in the UK. So delighted to be here. I'm checking in from Los Angeles, where we are based, and so pleased that Anastasia asked me to participate in the program this evening. And thank you, Anna, for all you've done as the chair for the last 3 years of 2020 Women on Boards in the UK. And I'm delighted to hear your speakers, and thanks to all of the mentors. I'm one of them in the mentoring sessions after the outstanding panel. So just to tell you a little bit about 2020 Women on Boards, the organization is 10 years old. It's a campaign. It is not a membership organization, but a campaign which advocates for more women on boards. We educate women on how to get onto boards, and we also collaborate with companies to try to encourage, gently prodding and encouraging companies to bring more women on corporate boards. And when the two founders, Stephanie Sonnabend and Mally Giro, started way back in 2010, they realized that there was no measuring device at that time. There are many now, but there was no one measuring here in the States, that is, because the Hampton-Alexander report was already measuring in the UK, but not here. So the two of them, Stephanie and Mally, started 2020 Women on Boards as a research organization initially, and then a grassroots campaign. So back then in 2010, the statistic of women on boards here in the US was only 10% of the Russell 3000 companies. And that's 3,000 companies that are publicly held in the US. Those are the largest companies, similar to your FTSE 350. We have a few more, but the good news is that from 10% in 2010 The statistic in the US is now, as of this year, 22.6% of board seats in the Russell 3000. It's about 25,000 board seats. And since 22.6% are held by women, it's about between, one a little bit better than a fifth and almost a fourth. Makes me think of the pubs that used to be open in the UK, where I used to come and love to visit. So I hope to get to come to the UK next year and to London to enjoy this event with you in person. And two other sentences I'd like to add: that 2020 Women on Boards is now global, thanks to Anna and all your hardworking committee. So we not only have London in our network, our itinerary of events, but we also have Zurich and Madrid and Mexico City, and soon to have Japan as well. And we had our first global broadcast last week, which is so exciting. It was a global kickoff, which was live streamed online. And we had Melody Hobson and Valerie Jarrett, and the most important speaker of all, Melinda Gates, who talked about the importance of having women on corporate boards. Thousands of volunteers around the US and the globe are involved in this effort. And I'd just like to share with you that 6,000 people are registered for all of our 28 events around the US and the world. And last week with the Global Conversation, which you can still see as a recording, all of you are paid guests, so you'll be able to see that on our website. We had 3,300 people attending the global broadcast. So I think we are definitely building momentum, everyone. And among the 28 events, we have 400 director coaches of all these events who are helping mentor and coach the participants, and certainly 120 panelists throughout our network. And it's all happening between Tuesday, 2 days ago, and December 4th will be our closing event in New York. And all of you certainly can check into our website, 2020wob.com, see our other events, join our other events, and then also see the research that we do annually in the US. We leave the UK, of course, to Denise, but in the US, to be able to see what companies have women on boards, what companies don't. And certainly there are many that would like to have UK women, especially doing global business with you and your fantastic country. So thanks for being here today. I'm so pleased that you're involved in 2020 Women on Boards. Oh, and if you ever want to have a primer, this is my book. It's called The Board Game. Whoops, they're winning the board game. And it's a sort of the Bible on how to get on corporate boards. And we have some tips for international markets too. Thank you, Anastasia, for inviting me. Have a great session today. And I look forward to seeing several of you, quite a few of you, in my mentoring session this afternoon. And thank you, panelists, for all you're doing today. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Betsy. We're delighted to have that UK-US collaboration, keeping that special relationship alive. And I've noticed that somebody in the comments has already mentioned it's time for Canada. So I think we might be looking to strike out into another country very soon for 2020 Women on Boards. Next, I just wanted to introduce you to our fantastic speakers. They're all going to talk to you individually, but I wanted to share their achievements and their biographies with you collectively. I'm just going to run those through, and then we'll introduce them, and they'll do their own kind of input and share some fantastic thoughts and some top tips with you. So the first speaker we're going to have this afternoon is Dr. Heather Melville, OBE. So Dr. Heather Melville, OBE, is Director and Head of Client Experience at PwC. She's also Chair of CMI Women, and NED of Enterprise Enfield, and patron of WIBF, which is Women in Banking and Finance. Heather is an accomplished and passionate sales leader with more than 20 years of experience covering global client relationships across FTSE 100 to 250 companies. Heather has a strong reputation for building dynamic teams, resulting in improved operational efficiency and increased performance. Her commitment to achieving excellence for customers, employees, and businesses has resulted in outstanding financial results. Heather was awarded her OBE in 2017 for services to business and gender equality. Following that, we're going to hear from Francesca Exery. Francesca is a portfolio non-executive director with expertise in marketing and more than 25 years of experience in directing in both blue chip companies and startups in the digital, retail, FMCG and leisure and travel industries. Currently, Francesca is a non-executive director on 4 boards: F&C Investment Trust PLC, Marshall Motors Holding PLC, the AIC and Air France. She chairs the NED Talks workshop programme for senior women at WACL, and Francesca is also an investor in several startups. She acts as an advisor in the leisure, travel, retail and digital marketing sectors, and she works as a mentor to several digital entrepreneurs and executives. We're also delighted that one of our speakers is Patrick Dunn. So Patrick is the chair of the EY Foundation, ESSA, which is Education Sub-Saharan Africa, Delta, and a trustee of the Chartered Management Institute. He's the founder of Warwick in Africa, a visiting professor at Cranfield School of Management, a visiting fellow at Warwick Business School, and just like Betsy, he is an author. He's the author of award-winning book, Boards, A Practical Perspective. And then last, but by no means least, we're going to hear from Denise Wilson, OBE. Denise is Chief Executive of the Hampton Alexander Review. Denise has served as a non-executive director of Ecclesiastical Insurance Group, chair of the Remuneration Committee, chair of the Royal Academy of Arts Friends, and member of the Royal Academy Audit Committee. Her previous appointments include Chief Executive of the Davies Review and various senior executive roles at National Grid, BG Group, and British Gas. She's a business coach, a mentor, and a passionate supporter of women in business. So I think you'll agree we've got a fantastic foursome here to talk to us this afternoon. So I'm now going to invite the first of those speakers, Dr. Heather Melville, OBE. Would you mind switching on your camera and your microphone? And that will bring you to all of our attendees. And then we will give the floor to you, Dr. Heather, as you come onto screen.
Hi, can you hear me clearly?
We can indeed.
Right. Unfortunately, I've got some kind of bug that won't allow me to get into my video, so I might have to come off. Do you want to put one of the other speakers on while I come back off and come back in again?
Let's do that. This is the joy of live events, isn't it? It's the all the fun that we're trying to manage. You do that, okay. See if we can sort out my iPad. No problem at all. I wonder, this is kind of throwing to Francesca. I wonder if you would mind very much, Francesca. Are you ready to go?
I'm good.
You are wonderful, thank you. We'll pass over to you and we'll pick up with Heather in a little bit. So the floor is yours, Francesca. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for asking me to come and speak to you today. So I've been asked to answer 3 questions today. And the first one is, why is it so important to have a good pipeline of women at all levels of business, including non-executive directorships? And basically, it comes down to the fact that we know that diversity of thought is key to quality of decision making. And as women represent 50% of the population, more than 50% of the graduates from university, and in some industries, certainly in the industries I worked in, like travel, 80% of the customer base. So we need to make sure that their voice is represented at all levels of any organization, but mainly at the top where decisions are made. So that's the first point. Good diversity will drive better discussions, which in turn drives better decisions and therefore better outcomes. And gender diversity is also easy to measure, clearly, and therefore it's easy to implement if we want to. And often it's seen as so gender diversity is often seen as a driver for other forms of diversity following after that. So it is a very good idea. But most of all, over the last decade, we have had a plethora of evidence from really authoritative sources such as McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, Cranfield, PwC, Financial Times, you name it, that demonstrated that companies that have a good gender diversity at the top, and preferably throughout the organization, also happen to have better financial outcomes. And my question to everybody is, who does not need better financial outcomes these days? So it's not only a good idea, but it's a no-brainer. So that's the first question. The second one is, how does the role of NED become even more demanding during the COVID pandemic and in times of crisis? And what, if anything, we've learned through this year? So what has 2020 taught boards? Well, obviously, the pandemic has changed pretty much every aspect of our lives. And as you would imagine, board meetings are no exception. But a couple of interesting points came to my mind as I was thinking to answering this question. The first one is little and often. So we have seen that having shorter and sharper and more frequent calls does help the company to respond to the crisis and bring everybody along. And therefore, analysis paralysis is now a fatal condition for companies. So you no longer have you can no longer allow yourself to do that. The other thing that is without a shadow of a doubt came to the conclusion that technology is actually a force for good. I mean, who knew that we could do 100% of our job as non-executive directors virtually? I mean, I suspect it, but I've never experienced it. I experienced being remotely attending a board meeting or somebody attending a board meeting remotely while everybody else was in the room. And it wasn't that great. But now that everybody's remote and technology is so developed, like things like Zoom, I can actually foresee that this realization will drive more diversity because it will be acceptable to have mixed formats to the board calendar. So for example, one of my boards, I already have my dates for 2021, and out of 8 board meetings, 4 of them are already scheduled in as virtual, and only 4 of them, COVID permitting, will be face-to-face. But that means that suddenly we can hire people from all over the globe because they don't actually have to traipse around the globe 8 times a year. A few times will suffice, and that could be a lot more interesting for a lot of candidates, but also for a lot of boards. But also, in a very interesting way, video conferencing rewards certain key, and in my view, very much worthwhile board behavior, such as patience, listening skills, articulacy. We find more democratic and less over talking, and it kind of forces people to take their turn. And I think that's a great idea. Now, obviously, pretty much everybody realized during this pandemic, anybody who sits on a board, that cash is king. You know, companies with a strong cash reserves had a much easier time during this pandemic than those who didn't. But those who don't now understand how important it is to have a strong balance sheet and to strengthen their treasury discipline pretty urgently. So that is now undeniable. The other point that I thought was really interesting is that this whole piece about innovation, flexibility, culture of collaboration. Basically, we boards have realized that we cannot plan and forecast our way out of this, right? But we can elevate the situation with a bit more vision and operational agility. So as a result of the pandemic, never again will any IT director come to the board and present a business case that will take 3 years to implement and 10 years to pay back. We have seen that I mean, certainly I've seen in one of my boards in financial services where we moved an entire call center to work from home in a couple of days. And this is in a highly regulated industry where everything has to be recorded. And we did it. So there is no coming back from that, right? And also there is, to make that happen, you had to collaborate. So there is a new willingness to not sit in silos anymore, to foster more collaboration. And of course that will open new opportunities. And also it will, I think people are now much better at embracing change. And so all of that is a major learning and also one of the benefits that came out of this pandemic. And my final learning is that exit planning is vital. It's actually almost as vital as having a team that works on the here and now, on the cash, on the survival, on, I call it triage, like, you know, in an emergency room, which is what a lot of the companies were at the beginning of the pandemic. But if you actually siphoned off a bunch of people that separately from the get-go were working on a plan to come out of this, they actually ended up better off. So on one of my boards, that's exactly what happened. We had a work stream, separate work stream, just from the start, focusing on what happens when we come out of there, and to ensure that we would be winners. And we actually had that plan ready by mid-April. And then, you know, it's only sometimes in June when we came out of lockdown that we were able to implement it. But this preparedness and this clarity of what needed to be done and who needed to do what as soon as we came out of lockdown meant that against our competitors, we ended up further ahead in the wave. And that actually this exit planning is just as important, and people taking care of treasury and cash reserves. So these were like my 6 key learnings. I'm sure there's a lot more, but those were the ones that were salient for me. And the third area that I've been asked to cover is to give my top 3 tips or advice pieces for women who are attending this event who wish to become an executive or a non-executive board director. And the first tip would be to develop your personal brand. Some people call it elevator pitch, but I, as a marketeer, call it personal brand. It's all about being clear about what you can contribute, what makes you unique, what makes you great, relevant to the boardroom, and why you want to be on board. So that's kind of your personal brand. And basically, it's knowing the questions you're the answer for, and then having to communicate it clearly and succinctly. And one easy test is for you to try it with some people that you know, and test it out on them. And if they frown, if you see them frowning, you know that it hasn't landed well and that you need to pivot your elevator pitch, and keep testing it until somebody says, oh yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And then you know that you've landed it, and you can go and sort of communicate it. So that's my first tip. The second would be networking. Your network is your amplifier. And as women, we're not particularly keen on networking, but it is essential that you do that. You can't really be everywhere all the time. You know this thing, oh, you have to be at the right place at the right time. But actually, towards sort of non-executive director positions, you kind of need to be everywhere all the time, and it's impossible. So your network will be the ones reminding recruiters, or if you're not looking for an outside role, get promoted within your organization, will remind people that you exist. And they may even give you a position. So it is a very worthwhile activity. Get out there, get involved, give forward. And make sure that you're memorable. So sort of ask some unusual questions. For example, somebody once asked me, what was my superpower? And I thought, well, that's a really good question. And so ever since, I've been using that every time I meet somebody in a networking event and you don't know what to say, you start with that. And that is a great icebreaker and sort of makes you memorable. So you can take that as well. And the last point is about resilience. As you climb up, you need to make sure that you are resilient, because, you know, it's a triangle and at the top it's very narrow. And you need to be prepared to be rejected, and you need to be prepared to be rejected several times. And often, certainly within the clients that I mentor, I find that these are women who are at the top of their executive games. They've never been rejected in their lives because they deliver, they're achievers. And then they get into this non-executive arena and you get rejected left, right, and center, and you're not used to it. But keep an open mind about the opportunities that you may be considering, because your skills are eminently transferable and you can learn from new situation. And your career is not a linear thing. It's not a short thing either. We're all going to have to work until we're 80. So it's natural and normal that you'll reinvent yourself a number of times. And we are so lucky. We live in times and geographies where you can reinvent yourself several times through your career. I personally did it 4 times, sometimes because I chose to, sometimes because of other reasons. But in all cases, it ended up being so much more positive than I expected. So be cool about change. It builds resilience. So thank you for listening. I will now pass you back on to Anastasia.
Thank you so much, Francesca. That was brilliant. I'm going to spend a little bit of time thinking about what my superpower is, but I'm also definitely going to use that as an icebreaker when I'm networking. So thank you so much for that. So hopefully we've got rid of the tech gremlins and Dr. Heather Melville, OBE, is back with us. And can I invite you, Heather, to switch on your camera, and fingers crossed this time it works.
Oh my goodness, it did a few minutes ago, not again. I'm going to come off and I'm going to...
We did see you.
It was. I think when I switched it off, I'm going to put my camera back on and leave it on.
I reckon that might be the answer.
I'll come off and I'll just stay on in the background.
Don't you worry. I think we're going to have to do that. As I say, obviously, we don't have the superpower for sorting out those little tech gremlins, but you come back when you can. In the meantime, then, I'm going to ask Patrick Dunn if he is ready to go next. Patrick has joined us because we have men who are part of our mentor group today and who are also going to be our speakers, because we're very clear that this is not a woman problem, and that the benefits are for all of us. So Patrick, sorry to kind of jump to you just when you thought you could have like a minute's rest. And if Heather joins you on screen, don't worry, you can just look like a perfect twosome, and then we'll let you take the floor. And then once you're done, I'll just kind of pick up and we'll move on to Heather.
That's great, thank you. And it's always great working with a number of you on the panel here today. And Heather and I have done many things together. Now, I always love following Heather because she's so wise. So there's a treat to come. Well, it's great actually to hear from Betsy the progress in the US. When I was a member of the Higgs Review, the proportion of women on boards in the UK was only 6%, which was terrible. And we were doing a lot of work around the demographic of the pipeline, and then the 30% club came behind that, and so on. We're still not making as much progress as we should. I mean, I'm delighted that the 2 boards that I chair have around 50% women. So one has 6 out of 12, and the other has 3 out of 7. And the reason for doing it is of course because it's morally right and all the rest of it. But actually, I would echo what Francesca said. It's so much about creating more value. Actually just does add value to what you do, what you think, the way you think, and your connection with all sorts of key stakeholders. I think Francesca really was brilliant at answering those 3 questions. And so I'll just pick some other things to add to what Francesca said rather than repeat them. The first is, I think, this is a sort of difficult thing, but it might be really good news for women in the UK at the moment, and that is that board churn is rising. So my firms at different search firms tell me that there's probably 20-25% board churn at the moment, and a number of people have diversity targets, and if they're serious about those targets, then they should be able to appoint many of the great women that are available currently. So I would hope that in the UK we would really see a little bit of a step change in the number of women on boards, because that board churn is rising. Why is the board churn rising? And partly this is a result of the pandemic. Well, first of all, different needs need different people, and so many strategies have been changed dramatically through the crisis, and you need different people, and so that's one driver. The second driver, I think, is that many people haven't really stepped up. Some have actually got in the way. So friends of mine, chair friends of mine, are dealing with that, and so there are people who really haven't really hacked it in the crisis, and they're being replaced, which again creates more opportunities for others who can step up in times of crisis and are more resilient, and actually better suited to the environment, this highly uncertain environment that we might be living in. And the third reason is a self-selection reason, in that I think many people, perhaps some who've overboarded, but others just feel this really wasn't the deal they signed up for. There's way more work, much less fulfillment than they thought. And it's interesting, it's always in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? I mean, I really enjoy crises. Maybe that's a bit masochistic, but I think you learn the most. And one of the things you learn most in a crisis is who your real stars are in the organization. And I've been wonderfully pleased at a number of people in the organizations where I'm involved, seeing them really shine in moments like this. And I think there's a lot of people who will get their first board appointments, and hopefully 50% of them will be women through this, but they also need support. And I think the sort of things that Women on Boards do and other organizations do to support those people getting their first board appointments and dealing with the issues, some of the things that Francesca said are terrific. The other thing that I think that has really come much more into focus has been the board's connection with people issues. And that's not just, are our people safe? Are they okay? It's a whole load of other things. Are we making things as easy as possible for them? I mean, I was struck by, I chair the EY Foundation, which is an independent charity, but receives its majority of funding from EY. And EY managed to move about 18,000 people from office work to virtual in a day and a half, which was absolutely staggering. And actually, many of the people who organized that and made that happen were women. In fact, the person who leads that function was a woman, and the way she galvanized people and got everything done, and with the care and the thought that went into that was just fantastic. One other thing that's changed in the pandemic, I think, for the mathematicians amongst you, I've always thought that boards and the executive teams are a bit like a Venn diagram. You've got sort of one circle being the board and the other circle being the executive, and you've got that wonderful intersection in the middle, which flexes from time to time. And this year, I think that intersection has flexed quite a lot. And the boards, good boards, have, they've needed to do more in terms of oversight, but they've also needed to do a lot more in terms of support. And one of the interesting things, I think, as the situation develops, is how does that intersection flex back? I think a lot of boards have also learned a lot about what is the real culture of the organization during the crisis, and a board should really feel a deep sense of ownership for the culture during the time that you're on that board. You should know what culture you've got, you should know what culture you want, and you should have some sort of plan for getting from one to the other if they're different. I think many cultures have strengthened during the crisis because of the leadership that's been shown by the board and the executive team, and many organizations have been greatly weakened because the real culture has come to light when the chips are down and when people are fighting over resource and jobs and all the rest of it. In terms of the three things that three tips, there are three things that I found helped me when I was early on in my board career and still help me to this day. The first is really, I think it's so important to listen to what people think, and that can be different to listening to what people say. If you can imagine what the thought bubbles are in people's heads, particularly difficult with a Zoom type of environment, and you can try and get some sense of how they're feeling and thinking, that makes a big difference in terms of picking up signals, picking up people who are maybe more introverted and not expressing a concern about something. All the body language skills we've learned in a physical board world, we're learning different ones for the Zoom world. I'm mildly dyslexic. It's quite a challenge in terms of reading board papers, all sorts of things, and it's really challenging on Zoom for me with gallery view, the slides if you have them, and a chat and Q&A. It's sort of sensory overload, and so I'm learning lots of new techniques to try and overcome those. The second thing is actually another piece of maths, and it's the normal distribution, or a bell curve. And the way I think this is relevant to our time is if you think of the vertical axis being effectiveness, and you think of the horizontal axis being pressure, and you think you're asleep at one end, you're highly paced, dynamic, but reflective and well controlled in the middle, and you're a headless chicken at the other end. I think we've all been all points on that curve in the last year. And one of the things a board has to do is help the management keep in that central zone, particularly when they're trending the other way, and being conscious of the pressure that we're putting on people, knowingly or unknowingly, is really important. And the final tip, I think, is to be a really good non-exec or chair. The art of conflict management is really important. Knowing when to compete. So if it's over a values thing, something you just will not tolerate, you have to be quite competitive. When to compromise, to accept, you may not get all that you want, but you can get most of what you want. When to collaborate, which is obviously a preferred mechanism for most people. When to just accommodate and say, actually, yes, we, in the spirit of moving on quickly, we'll actually just accept that and then move to the next thing. And when to avoid. Sometimes some things are best not said at that moment. They need saying, but they might need saying in a one-to-one as opposed to in front of everybody, or they might need saying before, so thinking ahead and doing it. So there's my few thoughts to answer this. It's a huge honor to be here as an honorary woman. I think Heather sometimes describes me as that. And look forward to the Q&A, and really looking forward to the mentoring session. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Patrick. We really appreciate that. And I'm going to definitely listen to what people are thinking, think about those thought bubbles coming out of their heads. And I know that people are really enjoying that. I can see from the comments already that people are taking lots from this. And I'm delighted that Dr. Heather Melville, OBE, is back. We can see her, we can hear her.
Brilliant.
It's amazing. It's all of the good stuff. So Patrick and I are going to leave you to it, Heather.
Thank you. So while this trauma was going on, this whole thing around my laptop crashing, I thought to myself, how appropriate is it when I'm talking about what are the things we've had to really put up with through 2020? And for me, it's about technology. It's about how we embrace it, how we remain calm and effective. And I've just had to do this. I'm on a call with a global audience, and just as I'm about to open my mouth and speak, everything freezes. So one of the lessons I've learned throughout all of this is to remain calm, to become technology savvy. I knew if I couldn't get onto my laptop, I had my iPad, but what I didn't have was the link to allow me to do that. So of course, brilliantly, Women on Boards have sent me somebody to be able to make me do that straight away. That can happen in our everyday life. That can happen just before we go into that really important, critical board meeting, or indeed, if you happen to be going for an interview, be prepared. So that thing for me is around being confident. I've learned that you have to be adaptable. Definitely. I've learned that we've got to be resilient over and over and over again. I lost 4 close family members during the last 6 months. None of them are related to COVID. But what is interesting is the impact of COVID and everything that was happening had a huge impact on me, whether it was the isolation from my family, from my colleagues, to simple things as being able to have a hug with your nearest and your dearest ones. So I've had to really tap to whoever I am, whoever the person is that I am, to make sure that I could pull myself through that. So that's where the resilience comes into it. I think dealing with isolation is something we've never had to deal with in the whole of our life at all, in this way, in the workplace. We're used to going in, speaking to somebody at the coffee machine. How was your day? Can you help me with this? Can I help you with that? What's happening? I think about new people that start in our firms now, starting their careers during this whole awful period. So it really is about how do we get people to think differently, how to transform themselves, how to be adaptable, how to remain calm and be prepared for anything. So I'm really, really excited to be here today. And what's interesting, this was not planned, as you can imagine. So being able to bring myself and get ready for this is all the stuff that's happening to us on a day-by-day basis. I've been on calls with C-suite chief execs, and they're chatting into the camera and they have forgotten I can't hear a word because they forgot to put their to unmute themselves. That happens to somebody really junior, but also somebody extremely senior. And we have to pick ourselves up and be clear about how we proceed and get to the next level. I think the three things that I think about that have been really key during this time. In fact, there's probably four. And I think one of them is our health. We've seen that it's too easy to really focus on everything else and not focus on our health. Yet still our health is the one thing that's our richness. If we don't have our health and our emotional health, we just can't deliver in any sense whatsoever. Many people who have just sat still for the whole day into the night, haven't moved, that's impacting on your mental health. So it's really important that we find things to crystallize us as individuals that separate the whole work environment to our home environment, which has become one place now. I sit on a couple of boards, and so for me, and I work with Patrick quite a lot, and we've been going through quite a lot of intensive periods at the moment, because the biggest thing for us right now is how we work with leaders and managers and take them through this time, this period in our lives that no one has ever experienced before. No organisation's ever had to work the way they've had to work. So it's really been important that we come together as a group of senior people, support each other, leave our disagreements outside. Yes, we challenge if it's something that's around our values, but being able to be authentic, be your true and authentic self is really important. Taking care of your health has never been more important, and especially as we go through the next couple of months and the uncertainty we have. The other thing I'm going to tell you, which some of us don't do very well, particularly women, is that network. And many of us will think we've got an excuse now. We don't need to network. I'll just get on with my job. You need it even more so. You need to develop that network. You don't have to be in the same room as them physically, but you can be in the same room with them through a whole range of different channels. I have met some amazing, talented people that I may not have met if we weren't in lockdown, because we've really had to do things different and be very creative. Instead of saying we can't do this, let's see how we do it. I have had audiences where normally we might have 40 people and we've raised that to 200-300 people, because we've got everybody in a captured environment that we may not have ever had before, or it may have taken us a long time to do it. We have that at our wrist now. And the other thing I'm going to say, this is the time for us to think about our development as leaders, our development as women, our development as people who are specialists. I've invented something called a power hour with my team. And I said there's 24 hours in the day. One of those hours has got to be our power hour. That means we connect to something that's really important to us. We connect to something, whether it's we're reading, we're learning, there's a new program or something that we didn't have the time to do before. We need to do that. It is really, really important, because we're never going to get this time back again. People have said to me, how do you cope in the evenings, especially with everything that's happened? I said, well, I'm using that opportunity to declutter my house. I'm using that opportunity to read books that I've had on my wonderful bookshelves that I've never really had the chance to read. I'm using the opportunity to handwrite letters. When was the last time you handwrote a note to somebody? And knowing how meaningful it is when it arrives on someone's door means a lot. So we've got to think about things that help us to take ourselves out of this space, so we're not in that place of negativity. And I think it's really important that our profiles, our LinkedIn is updated, all of those social media things are updated. Tweet, share programs, share reading, share things that you have done that you've learned during this period. Share them on LinkedIn. You'd be surprised the amount of people who are interested. And so the other thing for me is people who help me throughout my career. And I'm going to share those with you now, who are people that can help you. There are people who are right around us now. And sometimes we take it for granted. Okay, so the people I've learnt most from in my career, I have to tell you, have been senior men. They've sponsored me, they've pushed me, they've challenged me, and I've learned from them. And do you know, when I say I've learned from them, I've watched how they operate. Well, at some point, we're all going to do something we've never done before. We're all going to go into that meeting that we were not prepared for. We were asked to attend at the last minute, and those butterflies are floating in our stomachs. The one thing I say to you, watch how other people operate. Make sure that if you don't know something, you say, I'm not sure of that, but let me come back to you with that later on. Have that air of confidence in there, so they think that they're dealing with somebody who really, really understands themselves, and they will really look up to you for you stepping in at the last minute. I think that is just so key. The other thing for me is we really need to engage our colleagues up and down in the ladder. Our network outside of us is really important. I have got people who are really junior people in other organisations. I've pinged them just to keep in touch with them. Tell me what's going on for you right now. Or how would you deal with this situation if it was there? I'm engaging with them. That means they remember me. I remember them. When there is something that they need me for, they'll reach out to me. Heather, would you mind? Could you, do you know, I've connected so many people together. And that's another thing that's really important to us right now, that connectivity and sharing our network is priceless. So for me, it's also engaging men as sponsors. And, you know, we need these board positions, and to have the board positions, we need people already in those positions. When I went to go onto the board of CMI, it was a male president that interviewed me. And I said to him, I've got plenty to do, but I'll do this because I'm passionate about change. But what I'm also going to say is, if I give my time and my commitment to this company, what I need back from you is your support in getting me ready so that I'm board ready for one of those board positions that will come up in the years ahead of me when I'm ready to retire. So see that transaction that we've had there, and I've kept that going. So I really think it's important that you think about what it is that you want to do next and how you're going to feed that into this time now. One of the lessons that we will have, that we will take outside of COVID-19, is that we have all transformed ourselves. We've all learned new skills, met new people, fantastic leadership skills to take into an organisation. Does it matter that you're a technology person? Does it matter that you're the best SME? Not right now, actually. What is more important than anything else is that you're able to galvanise your team of people who work remotely and deliver through them. Bring them on board, which is really important, but also be seen as the leader that takes people on a journey. Our clients watch that behaviour. They love it. They aspire to want to be with us because they feel that when we're doing it in our own organisations, with our own teams and our own people, then we can absolutely do that for them. And the final thing I want to say to you, because it's something I'm practicing every day, please, please, please keep fit during the pandemic. Please, it's really important. Walk every day. Just do something that engages your mind, that keeps your blood flowing, that actually keeps you healthy. I'm really excited to have been here today. Apologies for the delay, but you know what? It was worth being here. If I had to go to my neighbours and log onto their laptop, that's exactly what I would have done. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to mentoring you later on.
Thank you so much, Heather. You're amazing. And we definitely would have missed you if you hadn't been here. So thank you for making it happen. Before we ask you to switch off, there was one of the questions that just came in, was that quid pro quo when you were talking to that male chair of CMI. How was that received? So the question was there a momentary pause? Or when you said, I'm happy to do this, but I need you to help me, was he up for that straight away? How did that work out?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because I did it in such a way that actually somebody of his level would expect that, right? We do that across the board table. Patrick and I will know when we want to get something done, we sit on the same board. There is a way that you will work around that room to get what you want, even if you've got to do it before you get into the room. And that's something that people really need to understand, the skills of navigating your way around that boardroom. So I was very clear with him. You've done your homework, you know what I can do. Now I'm telling you what I want in return, and I need you to help me on that journey. 99% of people will always say yes. He said yes straight away.
Brilliant. That's excellent. Kate, I hope that answers your question. Heather, thank you so much. I know people are going to be really excited to be in your mentor group a little bit later. And also we want to pass on our condolences and thank you for sharing so openly what you've been going through kind of personally as well as professionally, because I think it's by bringing our whole selves to work and to these events that we get so much more out of it. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Heather. So our final speaker for this afternoon, last but by no means least, our second OBE is Denise Wilson, OBE. So I wonder, Denise, if I can ask you to turn on your camera, turn on your microphone. I can see you there, which is wonderful. So that's good news. And I will pass over to you, Denise, to round up the kind of speaker element of this afternoon's event, if that's okay.
I'm going to do that. Thank you very much, Anastasia and Betsy and 2020 Women on Boards for inviting me to speak, and for my great fellow panelists beforehand. If my connection is a bit unstable, do please just let me know, because I'm getting a few warnings, but I'll just go ahead. I'm going to start first with my 3 top tips, actually. And the challenge I have is coming after 3 phenomenal speakers who've all given brilliant tips, and to try myself to come up with something that is slightly different. And I'm not sure I've achieved that, but here we go. So top tips for women. You know, I would always say to women, be very clear about what you want. Be very clear about what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, which job you would like next, what you aspire to be, which role you aspire to be, and ask at every single opportunity you get to do that. And whether it's chairing a committee, being on a committee, whether it's the next rung up on the ladder, whether it's something as simple as, you know, wanting to join a meeting or wanting to join a voluntary group, or always ask. And I think, you know, I probably saw this a lot in my own career. I was often surprised when people would say, so are you ambitious? Do you want to the next level up? And I was like, of course I do, you know, why do you even question that? And it took me many, many years to realize that actually I just assumed that people knew I wanted a big job, the top job, and that I was ambitious and wanted to get on, kept my head down working hard, but rarely said, what's next for me? This is what I want. How do I get there? So that would be my first top tip. And my second one would be, you know, as women, look, we just need to support other women, and we need to do that more. We need to do that more robustly, and we need to do that more often. And that sounds unnatural, but, you know, I guess when everybody's kind of jockeying for position, it isn't always a given. I would just say, look to our male counterparts. They do it very well. I have boys at home, and I've watched little boys all the way up, you know, now not so little, they're in their mid-20s, but I have watched them working with their other male colleagues from tiny tots, and they're incredibly supportive of one another. They go around in big gangs of chums, and they fall out for 5 minutes, and then they're back as strong as ever. And you know, women could do something, could learn out of boys and men's book as to how they support one another relentlessly and always, and how they band together in groups which, you know, are helpful for themselves and their own career, also helpful for their organisation, and ultimately as well, that collaborative spirit is supportive of the economy too. And the last one, before I move on to what I've really been asked to talk about, which is progress in the UK and where are we? My last one is a semi-jocular one, actually, and it's something that I might say to maybe any of our younger people who are in the audience, or maybe some who are past this stage but actually might want to share themselves. And as I said, semi-jocular, but there's you know, there's a real meaning behind it too. And I would say that, you know, if you want to have a career, a big job, and you want a family too, or you just want a big life outside of work, then remember we do have a choice, and choose your partner very wisely. And you know, you do need phenomenal support at home, and it has to be a partnership to make everything work. And if things aren't working well in the home environment, then you won't be able to give your best and your whole self to your work either. So that's my third little top tip. So let me move on now to to what I've really been asked to talk about, which is just in summary, where are we in the UK? Where are we on boards? Where are we in leadership? And as many of you will know, the UK chose a voluntary regime, a series of reviews to address the shortage of women on boards and in leadership layers in the UK, rather than legislation, which is what many other European countries chose. So first we had the Davies Review, which started in 2011, which asked the question, why when women achieve so many great accolades in education and in other walks of life, are there so few women at the top of British business? And that was a series of recommendations just for boards to begin with, and a target of 25%. The Hampton-Alexander Review was a second successor review, which started in 2016, increased the target to 33% for FTSE 350 boards, and also brought in that important leadership cohort. So 23,000 executive committee and direct reports to the executive committee in our largest public listed companies. And that is the work that I do, that the team at Hampton-Alexander do, supported by Government Equalities Office and the Department of Bays, and a very small but passionate and dedicated team steering group. And we track and monitor progress on boards and in that important leadership layer, and publish the report every year. So where are we now? On boards, on FTSE 100 boards, we have 35% women, which is a good start and great progress from where we began in 2010. And in that leadership layer, which is around 20,000 roles, we have around 30% women. If you look wider at the FTSE 350 boards, that has just reached the 33% target, which was the target that we set in 2016. So clearly there's a big question as where and what next. Where have we made progress? So in terms of the numbers themselves, clearly there are many, many more women, and well over 1,000 women who have been appointed to our FTSE listed boards in that period. But representation isn't everything. We're also raising the bar on what the expectations are of companies in terms of boards. So whereas in 2010, 152 boards had no women on at all, were all male, now there's only one. And then boards started to appoint one woman, and that was looking rather tokenistic. And just a couple of years ago, we had 80 odd boards with only one woman on that board. And we started to say, now, come on, that's not quite right. Shine a bit of a harsh spotlight on those boards. And now we're down to just 15. So every year the bar is raised. I would say as well that, when I look at the appointments that are coming through, boards are appointing not just one woman, but often two or three, so some group recruitment, and not content with that 33% target, but moving forward to gender balance. So we have well over 100 companies in the FTSE 350 at 40% or more women on their boards, and we currently have around 220 of the FTSE 350 at the 33% or greater. So really good progress, actually, really good progress. We know supply is not the issue. The supply pipeline of capable women competent of sitting on our boards and in our big leadership roles is full to overflowing, but we know that the opportunity for women, in fact, anybody who presents differently to a senior white man is not there to the same degree. What have we got left to do? So I would say the stage we're at, we pretty much have all of the known issues, the barriers, the complex and compounding barriers that face women out on the table. We just haven't quite had sufficient time to deal with them. And the companies that have made the most progress and that are at the vanguard of bringing women and other diverse groups to their table are looking at those really complicated areas such as gender stereotyping, all those unhelpful myths that abound, bias in the selection process, which we know is still there, microaggressions that are not that micro actually, and particularly when you face them on a daily basis, they start to feel pretty macro in the aggregate. So men speaking over women, asking second or third generation British-born people where they come from, not knowing how to pronounce somebody's name or getting their name wrong. I've sat on boards and been called Christine, Caroline, and Helen. and on many occasions, you know, how hard is Denise really? How hard is it to know somebody's name when there's only 12 of you sitting around the table, doing all the work, not getting invited to the meeting, women being expected to do the minutes, collect the coats, collect the coffees. The list goes on. They'll be familiar to many of you. Those are the things that kind of behavioural training is where those companies that have made most progress is trying to break those down, trying to educate their workforce, and trying to give people a language so that they can talk confidently about race, confidently about sexism, so that they can tackle issues when they see them and be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And as we all know and have seen in this year, that, you know, silence is not helpful, passivity is not helpful. So they're working to give their employees, their leaders in particular, their modern leaders, the tips and tools in order to be not just bystanders, but upstanders. And that is the very next step that we need to take. And when we get there, then we will be in a much better place. But we have a way to go. I would just say that those issues are known and tackled. And if you're not hearing about any of the things that I've been talking about with your company, then start raising those, because those are that's the nub, and that is where all of the focus and attention now that I see, you know, as well as capturing the data and reporting and looking at gaps and all of the issues that COVID has brought up, making sure you're retaining your women, that they are not overrepresented in furloughs and redundancies. That is where the focus of those companies that are making those progress is, and that is where we need to be. We need more people to be not in that bystander, but in that upstander space. And then on we go. As I said, we have a way to go. The job's not yet done, but we're in a much, much better, much stronger place. And all I hear and all I see, the momentum is high. We just have a bit further to go on this runway. So with that, I'll leave it and hand over to questions, and back to Anastasia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. That's great. It's really good to hear how far we've come. And as somebody said in the comments, it's great to see the journey that we've been on, but more work to do. Thank you so much, Denise, for joining us as our final speaker. I'm delighted to say that the questions in the Q&A have been answered. Thank you to Francesca who did that. And I think we've answered some on the side, and I'm conscious of time. So rather than do kind of any more Q&A with our panel, what I'm going to do is thank all of our speakers. So Betsy, to Patrick, to Francesca, to Heather and Denise, and just kind of round up this part of the event. And what we're going to encourage you to do now is to move into your breakout sessions. So this is where you'll meet your mentor and have a small group where you can have a conversation. It might be that we merge a couple of groups if we've got a couple that are a little lighter than others. So you may have the added bonus of 2 mentors. So you should have your mentor link in either the calendar invite or the email that was sent to you. If you can't find it or you get lost, I'm going to post in the chat a Zoom help centre. So you can log into that and our fantastic team will make sure that they direct you to the right place. But I think what we wanted to say was thank you to not only our speakers, but also to all of our mentors and all of you as attendees. Thank you for bringing your enthusiasm and your interest. And I think we can sum up the first part of the event in one of the lovely comments that I've been seeing in the chat, which was to say thank you to everyone today, some wonderful advice and insights, and I'm feeling really inspired. So on that note, thank you so much. We hope that inspiration continues into your breakout rooms. If you have a problem, log on to that help centre. Otherwise, please, you can leave the webinar now and move into your mentor session. And we hope you get just as much from that as you have from this session. Thank you so much from 2020 Women on Boards.